Good afternoon and welcome to our live stream webinar, Document-Centric e-Signature Apps. My name is Josh Levy and I'm the CEO of Computime, your trusted source for sales and channel distribution. Before we begin today's webinar, I'd like to give a special thanks to Fat Chimp Studios for doing the video and streaming of this presentation live to you today. They take the same technology that you use on a GoToWebinar and make it allow us to do a live video broadcast. Today's webinar is an integration case study on how Hospital Corporation of America, or HCA, is using the Wacom DTU 1631 interactive pen display. Joining me this afternoon are representatives from 3 organizations who all played a pivotal role in providing HCA with an e-signature application to meet their needs. I'd like to welcome Alan Orth, Business Development Manager of Healthcare and E-Documentation at Wacom Technology. Alan, thank you for braving the winter storms and joining us for this presentation live here in our studio.
Good to be here, Josh.
Great. Alan has been with Wacom since 2010 and is responsible for increasing Wacom's market share in the healthcare industry. He specializes in strategic product placement and business development. Also joining us remotely is Carolyn Kane, product evangelist at Highland Software. Carolyn has been evangelizing OnBase since 2009. With a background in communication and web design, her specialties in OnBase include electronic forms, obviously e-signatures, and correspondence management. Based out of Highland's headquarters in Westlake, Ohio, she shares her enthusiasm about OnBase with people all over the world. Also joining us remotely is Richie Lee, Senior Applications Engineer at Parallon Business Performance Group. Richie has worked with Parallon and HCA for 17 years, starting as a systems administrator, then a manager, before moving into his current role. Together, this panel will walk you through how each company played a part in helping to create a document-centric e-signature application that reduces implementation time and maximizes cost advantages, all while assuring security, reliability, and privacy. As always, if you have questions, you can submit them throughout the presentation using the question box on your screen. We'll get to as many of the questions as possible during our Q&A portion of the webinar. The best place to begin is with a brief introduction of the participating companies, and of course this will come from our guests. Alan, let's start with you. We've partnered with Wacom for a little bit more than a year now, and in that time we've done other webinars and trade shows with some of your colleagues. Give us a little bit of background on Wacom.
Well, Wacom is a company that makes products to make it a natural and easy interaction with your computer, as simple as that. So we make devices that you can write directly on a screen to allow that to be inputted directly into the computer.
And I spoke about a participation in a trade show. We actually have some footage from a BAI show that Wacom exhibited to give our viewers a chance to see a little bit more about those signature capture pads that we've talked about. Background-wise, you know that Wacom, the definition of Wacom, I always like to share that, so share that with our audience.
The WA means harmony, com, computer. So Wacom is harmony with your computer.
Great. Alan, Carolyn, can you give us some background on Highland for our audience?
I'd love to. Well, Highland is the creators of OnBase, and OnBase is enterprise content management software, which I'm going to go into a little bit more. So if you're not familiar with that term, you probably know what OnBase does, even if you're not really familiar with that term. But we're a company that does enterprise content management all over the world, and we have a lot of healthcare customers, but we have customers in lots of other industries. So just a little taste of what I'm going to talk about. We have documents that are in our systems, and signing is just one piece of that. So I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about what happens before and after those documents are signed, and that's what OnBase really does.
Great, Carolyn, thanks. And once again, to give you some background on Richie Lee, Richie is a senior applications engineer at Parallon Business Performance Group. He worked with Parallon and HCA for the last 17 years, starting as a systems administrator, then a manager before moving into his current role. Richie, can you give us some background on Parallon and then take us into the story?
Sure. Basically, in the mid-1990s, HCA became aware that it was inefficient to perform several identical back-office functions in each of HCA's 160-plus hospitals. Beginning in 1998, HCA saw the benefit of centralizing back-office functions such as patient accounting, accounts payable, purchasing, and a few other areas into several shared service centers geographically located close to our hospitals. That strategy grew to include shared services for medical records, physician order scheduling, human resources, payroll, and physician and nurse credentialing across 17 service centers in several states from Texas to Virginia to Florida. In about 2011, HCA recognized that its proficiency in several of these back-office functions could be leveraged for other healthcare delivery systems and created Parallon Business Solutions to begin marketing and selling our highly efficient back-office services for revenue cycle operations, supply chain solutions, workforce management solutions, as well as consulting services in all of these areas.
Richie, that's great. So basically, you streamlined your organization's processes and saw the potential to bring those back office services to the marketplace. Why did you decide to look into an e-signature solution? What was that initiative about?
Basically, we wanted to implement a paperless patient registration solution throughout the enterprise. The keys to that was to reduce the cost for making paper copies, the courier service, transporting the paper to service centers and scanning the paper in, reduce HIPAA risk of patient data being lost or compromised to transit to the service center, reduce registrations time by not having to make copies of documents, insurance cards, and driver's license, etc., and really to improve the patient satisfaction with the technology-savvy hospital. So our thought process was to extend and exploit the capabilities of our existing ECM document imaging solution OnBase.
That's great. And Richie, you went over some of I saw as part of that, you went over some of those goals. If we can show the audience some of those goals on the screen, then we'll also going to get to our next question for you, which is what options did you look at when considering different solutions?
Well, we really, since we already had OnBase as our data capturing, we went ahead and just basically used their solution, a module called front office scanning. So we just exploited the capabilities of their existing module.
Right. So you actually were using Highland OnBase, and you wanted to see if they could increase the front office part of that scanning module?
Yes, exactly. That's a module that comes with OnBase that gives us the ability to do front office registration, as well as bedside registration and so forth.
And in exploring the different choices for hardware, ultimately, what made you decide on the Wacom DTU 1631?
Well, the Wacoms we use in our high registration areas. We were looking at the ELO touch monitors, and basically the hand detection with the ELO monitors was undesirable, and we found that the Wacoms performed better and were capable of functioning what we needed in our high registration areas. So that was basically what it came down with decision of selecting the Wacom monitors.
And I want to bring this back to Alan. Alan, to be a product evangelist, some of those benefits of the Wacom pad. He talked about the hand, lack of hand recognition, the imprint of the hand on the device. What other? It's like pen on paper.
Right. As opposed to a touch screen, you don't have any interaction with your palm. We call it palm rejection. So it's naturally a process like you're signing a piece of paper.
Great.
You have pressure recognition and things like that.
Excellent. So now that we have a good understanding of the goals and the overall application that was selected, let's take a closer look at the role that Highland and the OnBase solution provided, as this was a multi-pronged integration. To give you a reminder of Carolyn's background, Carolyn Kane has been with Highland since 2009 as a product evangelist. With a background in communication and web design, her specialties in OnBase include electronic forms, signatures, and correspondence management. Carolyn, can you explain exactly what OnBase is and the issues it solves?
Absolutely, that's what I love to do. Thanks for that great introduction. So OnBase is, as I mentioned, enterprise content management, and so there are so many benefits to signing electronically, but as I mentioned before, that's really only one part of the process when it comes to having electronic documents. In your organization, if you want to make them electronic, you also have to manage them before and after those documents are signed. And that's where ECM really is going to come in, and that's where OnBase really can shine. So in 1 minute or less, I'm going to give you the ECM 101. So if you're familiar with this term, don't worry, you don't have to go through a lot of backup here. But if you're not familiar with it, you might see it thrown around. And it really gets down to the root of the problem, which is that if you're using paper, that's going to slow down your business. Paper is manual. Paper only has a certain amount of acceleration that it could eventually reach. So your processes are going to slow down if you're using paper. Enterprise content management is all about harnessing that paper and automating your processes so that you can really do things much faster with much less resources. So the problem with paper is that, it can't be in two places at once. And since we're focusing on HCA, and that's healthcare, that's a really big problem in healthcare. If you have a paper document in one place and it's not available when it comes to patient care. So they have to search for it, or they don't know it's available, so that can really compromise patient care. So to solve that, a lot of times we'll see people making duplicate copies. But the problem with that is that those get out of date. Somebody's going to start writing notes on that paper copy. But those notes are never going to transfer to that copy that's still in our front office registration area. So they get out of date really quickly. And it can only move so fast. As I said, there's a limit to how much you can accelerate a paper process. It's expensive to store, and that's something that I know HCA struggled with, is having to store and transport all that paper. And it's difficult to find. If that's critical to patient care, we definitely want to make sure that they can access that. And there's a lot of concerns generally with privacy regulations, and that's certainly true in healthcare, and it's true in many other industries, no matter where you are in the world. So security of information is a really big issue. And then when we get down to it, we're talking about signatures. This is where a lot of people run into that snag with having a paperless organization is, well, we can make a document, we can have it be born digital, but then we have to print it out to have somebody sign it. And then we can scan it back in, but at that point, you've already introduced all the problems of paper just because we're printing it out to sign it. So this is where it all comes together. Signing documents electronically allow you to really manage your content on an enterprise level. So we want you to quit paper. OnBase can help bring that together with the signature solutions we're talking about today. So this is just a little diagram that talks about an ordinary business process. And if it's a paper-based process, then you might have these. You might have those paper forms, and it goes through an entire process. And then at the end of it, you decide to scan that in so you can archive it. But if we just move this line over and we can capture that information earlier, we can actually complete the business transactions faster because we can automate a lot of that. We can let the machines do some of the work when it comes to classifying and routing and all of that, and just even accessing that information. It means we can really speed up the process. So this is really key. Managing the entire process, including that signature portion. And it's not just paper. We're talking about information that can come from file shares or mainframes or even email. You may have issues in your HR department when you have employees signing documents and attaching them to an email and bringing them in. They need to deal with that as well. So it's not just paper, it's all the content we have everywhere. And that's what enterprise content management does, and that's what OnBase really does.
So Carolyn, I know
we're getting to the signing part, and we're talking about a lot about healthcare today. This goes into many industries, but I just wanted to use these examples from healthcare and HCA. There are so many signatures in the clinical side. You have front desk and registration, and then you also have bedside and consent forms. So there's different considerations depending on where people are signing those documents. And Richie already talked about how that had to be a consideration when they were looking at what kind of hardware they needed. And then another part of healthcare is home healthcare. And we have workers that are out in the field that are doing work at people's houses. So that brings an entire other dimension into that. And then you have that administrative side, and also human resources is a really big area where we see a lot of signatures.
Great, Carolyn.
So when we talk about front desk registration and bedside signing, like Richie was talking about, the top challenge here really is getting that information into the system. If you have somebody who is filling out and signing a paper form, somebody else needs to enter that information into a computer and scan that form in before it can be available. So that can compromise patient care, absolutely, because that information is not readily available. But the solution, and what Richie was talking about with what they have, he talked about front office scanning, which is an on-base module. And that module specifically allows us to capture the data in forms electronically at the beginning of the process. As soon as they walk in the door, they can capture insurance cards and ID cards and markup forms. And actually, you're going to get a demo of this later in the presentation so you can see how it works live. And capturing those signatures electronically right at the beginning of the process. And what's really great about this solution, but also most of the on-base solutions are very well integrated into any kind of desktop application that you're using, or in this case, an HL7 feed is something that would be used a lot in front office scanning or front desk registration. So, so you're reusing the data that already exists in your other system, and that system is more than likely mission critical for you. So it's important for that data to be absolutely identical, synced and up to date in both systems. So on-base absolutely can do that. And for the front office scanning specifically, we offer a configurable interface. So that means that whatever your business needs are, you can configure it to fit those needs. And intuitive to use. So it's easy for somebody sitting at a front desk to use as people are coming in and they're throwing papers at her and the phone is ringing. She can manage this really easily. And then some unique challenges when it comes to signing, we see in home health care, and that's connectivity. It's not just healthcare either. We see this with all kinds of road warriors and offline workers, somebody who might be doing any kind of work where they're going to lack connectivity. But this is huge in home healthcare because they're in somebody's home more than likely. And then in order to solve this connectivity issue, because they can't connect to everything that they have in the office, they make copies and they take them with them. So that's duplicate documents of data. Again, they're getting out of sync. But also, let's think a little bit about the security risk as they're taking around these documents and they're putting them in their bag, putting them in their car, leaving them in their trunk. There could be a big security issue there. So we do have solutions for that. We have multiple clients, including Disconnected and Mobile, that allows you to sign and review copies of those documents. And so you can capture all of that data in forms while you're with the patient, of course, capture the signatures electronically as well. And then finally, on the administrative side, and this just isn't just healthcare, this is something that we see anywhere we have large campuses or anywhere that has a busy office situation, is we have employees in large campuses, and sometimes it's just hard to track them down in order to get those signatures. So we have solutions for that as well. And this is where I'm talking about the entire process. So we have to have the ability for them to access those documents and sign them. So we have desktop and mobile clients. So no matter where they are, they can sign those documents. But then we have workflows that are fully configurable, and we can do things like send automatic notifications when a document is requiring their attention. So if they need to sign something, they can get an email and says, you need to sign this document. You need to update this document. And then we also can check to ensure that all of the documents are complete, that they're signed, that the entire package is complete. So this is really great when you're talking about human resources. If you have any kind of certifications that need to be complete or credentialing, then you can make sure that that's all up to date. And of course, we're going to capture those signatures electronically faster and without paper. And you are going to see an example of that. It's incredible. I can't wait to see that demo.
Carolyn, thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. What's always amazed me about the healthcare industry, and I've heard this before, is there's literally thousands of forms out there, but maybe only less than 100 forms actually require a signature, and it's those 100 that keep a hospital or a doctor's office from going totally paperless. So now that we understand the application and how HCA is using the device, Alan, can you tell us a little bit more about the actual DTU 1631 sitting right here? And it's kind of hybrid baby brother, baby sister, the DTU 1031.
Sure. First of all, just an explanation of Wacom. We are a global company, and we service a lot of different industries. So we do things in a number of industries that span the spectrum. What we're going to be talking about today is electronic documentation workflow and the products that we have for that. We split it into two categories. There's the signature pads. Those are the smaller devices you can capture a signature, then embed it into a document. Then the larger pen displays. And the pen displays are big enough that you can display an entire document on them.
And to give our audience a view of those, I mentioned this earlier, we have footage from a BAI conference where it has almost all of the pads displayed. So if we could show that, they can see an example of not just the 1631 and the 1031.
Sure, you can see them here. There's a number of different devices we have, from small signature tablets to larger pen displays.
Okay, so that's great. And you'll see that is actually at a BAI show, which is a conference for banking. So our audience today is not just healthcare, but it's also banking and other companies joining us. So that's an example of another industry. What other industries do we see?
Finance, insurance, tax preparation. There's a number of industries where, actually any industry where you need to capture some kind of information in a document with a customer interaction.
Okay, great. So you flew here a couple days earlier, which was great, and missed some snow. And we had the chance of shooting a product demonstration of you. Let's take a look at that.
We're showing a typical patient registration that would occur at an HCA hospital using the Wacom pen display with the Highland on-base registration system called front office scanning. In this case, a patient has already been entered into the hospital information system, and on-base receives it with an HL7 feed. The receptionist would then select from the patient list, and that would populate these documents here. The receptionist can scan a patient ID card, an insurance card, and then they can turn the device over to the patient so that the patient can complete a document directly on the screen. It's an electronic document, so there's no pen and paper involved, and it's a very natural way for the patient to complete a document, the same way they do it on pen and paper. So they take the pen and complete this document. Typical information that you would complete. And then they can go on to the second page where it's a patient questionnaire and health history, high blood pressure, any indications of past problems or treatments that they've had. When the patient is finished with this document, they can hit done, and all that information goes into the system. They can then select a HIPAA form. This is a document that the patient can read through and then sign their consent at the end. In this case, the entire document is displayed for the patient so that they can see it and mark it up, sign directly on the document itself. Once that document is completed, that also goes into the system. Now, the documentation is then typically transferred to a hospital information or some other system via an HL7 feed. At that point, the patient's registered and ready to go on to their next step in their treatment, their examination, whatever they are at the reception desk for.
That's an impressive display of the 1631 and the application with HCA and Highland on-base. There's other pads, though, as we were talking about. So do you want to share a little bit about how the family of pads is broken into? And we can go
Sure. There's basically two categories. One is the signature tablets, signature pads. So they're smaller devices. You can sign directly on there and embed that signature within a document. There's also the larger pen displays that allow a complete document to be shown, presented to a patient or to a customer so that they can review that document and sign directly on the screen, and that's on the document.
And the larger pen displays work like a monitor extension, but with a lot more features.
Exactly, yes. And as you talked about before, there's palm rejection. It's a natural feel because you're capturing the pressure as you sign, so it looks like a natural signature. And we have a number of different sizes. We have a couple out here today. The larger device, 16 inches, the one used at HCA, and then the smaller DTU 1031, that's about the size of an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, and it's a little more handy to hand to a patient, customer across the desk or in a bedside so that they can review a document and sign.
And what's impressive about both of them is it allows you to sign in the context of an actual document where the signature is supposed to go. Not to bash the little brothers of the signature capture pads where the signature is being signed and then encrypted to the right area.
Exactly. So what you see is what you get when they sign.
Exactly. Great. So with that said about the products, Richie, how has the application been working for HCA, and what kind of feedback have you gotten from users?
The application's been working great. The feedback we get from users is very positive. Obviously, their job is simplified where they don't need to get up and make copies of, driver's license, get the forms, and do other stuff now that everything is done electronically. Also, we had a real good boost in patient satisfaction, that their registration times were cut down. So we, across the board, we've seen improvement in those aspects.
And Richie, our audience is actually getting to view that demonstration of a patient going through a registration. So that's been a great application. You're also going to be able to see the 1631 and the 1031 on display at HIMSS in a couple of weeks, where Wacom will be exhibiting, as well as Computime, and I know Highland On Base, and I'm sure Parallon will be there as well. So we look forward to getting a face-to-face meeting at the HIMSS conference in a couple of weeks. At this time, we would love to open up the webinar session to your questions, and so that we can add them to our discussion. If you have any questions, as I mentioned earlier in the webinar, please use the box on your screen and we'll get to as many as possible. Submit them either now or throughout the Q&A, and like I said, we'll get to them. So let's take a look at some of our questions. So our first question, Richie, I'm going to come back to you. How long did the project take to implement once you decided on the solution?
Well, we started it back in 2007. Our first pilot was one of our hospitals, Centennial Hospital in Nashville, and the project wrapped up in November of 2009. So it took about 2 years.
Great, Richie. This question, I'm going to read it here for Alan. When a client presses the Done button and it goes back to the document menu, can the client see other client names, information from the selection list? Alan, is that better for you or for Richie?
Or Carolyn.
Or Carolyn. Carolyn, you want to take that one?
It's a function of the software.
You know what, I would like to, you cut out a little bit after you said it hits the Done button and goes back to.
So let me
you want to read the rest of that?
Yeah, let me repeat the question. When a client presses the Done button and it goes back to the document menu, can the client see other client names or information from the selection list?
Oh, sure. Yeah, you can see all of the data that's in the selection list, but once he hits Done, there still is one more step before you can actually upload that document into OnBase. So it's recommended that they finish working with that before they move on to another customer, because another patient. Once you do move on, you will, lose the data you have if you have not saved and uploaded that document. But once you do that, you can just hit upload, and then you can manage multiple patients all at once if you need to.
Great. And Carolyn, less specific, but more general about the hospitals. I'm going to stick with you. What are some of the biggest hurdles that hospitals and physician offices have in going paperless?
There are so many. I love how you mentioned that, that 100 or so forms are the ones that hold them back, because signatures does seem to be such a big obstacle. I have seen so many places that have made electronic forms, but they still have those paper forms just for the ones that need to be signed. And so signatures can be a really huge roadblock. Definitely people have their own ideas. Sometimes we have existing hardware that we're working with, or existing software that's not doing exactly what we want. So, so that's why it's really important to have kind of a trusted advisor. I love when our customers are working with Computime because they're always really good at making sure that they have put them together with the exact right solution. And so I definitely say that just having that advisor is the big key to getting over those obstacles.
The camera was on you, a still of you, but I was blushing here in the studio when you gave us the compliment. Much appreciated.
We love you guys.
So here's another question. We kind of talked that, like I said, the audience of our webinar is not just healthcare based. Alan, do you want to cover what other industries a little bit more and talk about applications? We can help our colleague back in Portland with those as well.
Sure. If you're going to sign a document electronically, it can be in any industry. So it doesn't matter if it's within an engineering firm, a financial institution, an education institution, it doesn't matter. You can do the same type of thing using one of our devices. You can write directly on the screen, and that's captured within the document.
Great. And Richie, here's a sort of a technical question, but not really. How difficult was it to integrate the DTU 1631?
Not at all. It wasn't difficult at all. I mean, it's a real simple device to set up. In some of our registration areas, we actually set it up as a second monitor, so that they can, and they use it with what we call the ergotron arm, which then can sway to where the patient is, so they don't have to get up out of their seat to sign. The drivers to load are very simple, don't cause any issue, and and as we were going through our upgrade from XP to Windows 7, drivers, it was seamless. So I haven't had really any issues with the Wacoms, and if we do, their tech support is outstanding.
Great. I think Alan's blushing here in the studio now on that compliment. Much appreciated. And Carolyn, with the Highland on-base solution, are people locked to the 1631 or the 1031 from Wacom? Or are there other pads that people can use?
Yeah, no, definitely. Those pads are the newest and best and brightest, but they're not always practical for absolutely every instance, and that's why we've worked with Wacom for a long time, and we know that sometimes somebody just wants to have a signature pad on their desk. It doesn't take up a lot of room. People are familiar with it. That's the best solution for them. So we work with the signature pads. We also can work with their graphic tablets. So sometimes we've had some instances, especially in different back office situations, where somebody wanted to have a multi-use device. And so those graphic tablets can function as a mouse effectively, and they can mark up in all kinds of different programs, and they can also mark up documents within OnBase as well.
Great, Alan. I think she's doing your job for you, but that's great. She
Great.
talks about
Love
being
it.
used as a mouse. I've also seen in radiology departments used to annotate x-rays and different things like that.
That's right. They're used for imaging as well, because you can display an entire image on a screen, and it's a very precise way to mark up an image if you have to outline a structure, pathology. They're used within laboratories to do cell cytology.
So the Wacom product line is great. You can go with a larger model that has multi-function devices. You can use it as the mouse. You can use it as the monitor extension. You can use it for a lot of different purposes, but it's still in the product family if you're just looking to capture the signature or display smaller amounts of graphics or smaller text. That's where the signature capture pad line comes in.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Yep. I think we got time for a few more questions. Carolyn, this is back to you. Does the demographic info get into the database as discrete data? And if not, do you have a solution for that?
I'm not actually familiar with what you mean by discrete data, but if we're talking about security of that data, we have actually, one of the ways that data can be fed into front office scanning is through an HL7 feed. And then we also have ways that we can encrypt the data within the OnBase database, ways that you can secure it, and then the ultimate security, of course, is the encryption. So it's very secure once it's within the OnBase database.
Excellent. Just a couple questions here. Time for a couple more. How does a signature capture fit in within an EMR? Anyone want to take this one?
I can address it.
Alan's going to take it.
You can use a signature tablet or a pen display with an EMR. Of course, there has to be an interface of some sort. Sometimes it's a document management system in the middle of it. Sometimes it's a direct interface that's done.
Here's another question. Carolyn, do I have to capture the signature every time someone signs a document, or can I have that same signature saved and used kind of as a rubber stamp? We get this question a lot in other fields in addition to healthcare, but I'd love to hear your answer on behalf of Highland's response to that.
Sure. Actually, I was just talking to some of our solution engineers about that exact situation where they had a customer that had a contract situation, and they needed to apply that signature to a contract repeatedly. And so they don't want to have a signature pad on that person's desk and have them sign every time. So no, both ways. I mean, you saw with our front office scanning, obviously when we have a patient at the desk, we're going to want them to sign that every time. But when you have employees at your organization or you have consistent users, we have ways that we can actually securely save that signature to that user profile so that they can effectively just add that signature at any time they need it. So they don't need to have a signature pad available. They can basically point and click and apply that signature.
Great. And on that note, when you do capture the signature via a signature pad or the display tablet, are you capturing biometric data or not?
Within OnBase, we are not capturing that biometric data. There are some ways that you can capture that data, and you can save the record of that data within OnBase if you need to, but we actually haven't seen customers who have had that as a requirement within OnBase. Certainly they are using that biometric data in some other applications where that is being saved. But within OnBase, as far as the documents that they're processing in OnBase, we're not actually seeing a need for that.
Exactly, and I would defend that as well. The image of the signature can be as legally binding as having the biometric data. There are several schools of thought on the need and the use of that biometric data. So it is definitely a bonus, but not a necessity for the legal compliance. But we don't claim to be lawyers, so we'll stay out of that one. Alan, it looks like you had something to add.
I was just going to say that the good thing is that information is available. The biometrics are there if necessary.
Correct. That is great. This has been one of my most fun webinars. I'm so thankful for Carolyn and Richie to join us remotely. As it turns out, it was smart not to travel for St. Louis with the winter storm. Unfortunately, we don't have time to get to everybody's question, but we will follow up with them. I'd like to give a special thanks to Alan for braving the weather and traveling here today to be with us. And again, Carolyn and Richie for joining us remotely. Giving you that special thank you to our video production partner, Fat Chimp Studios, who produced the product demonstration video that you saw, as well as for streaming this webinar live to you today. And most importantly, a special thank you to you guys who are joining us today for this presentation. Please be on the lookout for upcoming webinar announcements and things that are going on, not just in the healthcare industry, but in the banking and so forth. Sign up for our newsletter and keep telling us what you want to hear about. These are a lot of fun to do, and we enjoy them very much. Thank you, and this has been a presentation brought to you by Computime.